Vanguard.
Knowledge born.
Yeah.
United Front.
Tell it.
What you want, what you want, what you want.
To the Knowledge Radio.
We in here. What you got? Dot.
Work hard as a slave to one day be your savior. The wave unwavering. This is a labor of love. Rise with a purpose every day. Invigorated. If we were on TV, we'd be 10 times syndicated. If we waited for validation, a paycheck or accolades, we'd be starved, already lost or ran away. But when your square's solid and your circle too, you don't need a place for silence. The concept is conquered through media, not areas of people activity. A mix that don't lose ethnicity, tightness that don't lose elasticity. Explicitly, this isn't where we give the novice regard. Nah, this is where knowledge is born. Last time that I checked, I'm undefeated. Deliver edicts, can't resist when the gods build and manifest freedom. When lines get crossed, they may push a loss, cause they get handed a check. We kick a can and cancel your cancerous gestures. A prophet vision, precision, the prescription for the sickness is to inoculate your fate with the winning. Arrogant beginnings turn to humble endings. And US with KBA is a win-win. 1K, 1K.
Well, it's no shine in the tail.
Snapping off film.
I'm affiliated. 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 I'm affiliated.
This video is under fair use. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act in 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or purpose use tips the balance in favor of fair use. All rights and credit go directly to its rightful owners. No copyright infringement intended. Enjoy. Oh yeah. On your way out, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, man. This is the Argument League. Turn up.
I'm affiliated. 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 I'm affiliated.
This video is under fair use. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act in 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or purpose use tips the balance in favor of fair use. All rights and credit go directly to its rightful owners. No copyright infringement intended. Enjoy. Oh yeah. On your way out, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, man. This is the Argument League. Turn up.
Okay. Can't keep playing the intro. Shout out to the panel, man. I mean, to the chat. Hit that like button. Solar be on in a second. And to present a presentation. And, you know, you want to get down with the get down. So, waiting on him to join us. Hit that like button, please. As y'all come into the channel. Shout out to Big on the Tracks in the camp. Shout out to the Solarmind. Shout out to Knowledge Online. Shout out to the AOI. Shout out to the judges, peers, and the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could definitely keep the panel open. You know what I'm saying? So other people can hit.
Hold on, my shit messing.
Yeah, we want to make this into a discussion. Yeah, so definitely we're gonna keep it jiggy. Or after the presentation is done over and done with, we could definitely open the panel up. But even before then, if people want to come in, just go ahead and hit the link. Swab BZ posted it at the top of the chat, so you have access to hop on in. Because we're gonna be discussing some things tonight, and I heard things. We just are having a conversation about the white man, and in terms of American history, exactly when did he come to power? And that's always up for the debate, because there's nothing really you could trust about this beast, because he lies about everything. So he construct these lies and he create a system, and the foundation of it is based off of lies and deception. So I appreciate people like Lance that actually goes into the mud to kind of dig up the truth. And sometimes it may sound a little crazy, and sometimes he may be a little off in our opinion, but it's definitely needed, just to get exactly what happened, in terms of this struggle for power, and how eventually this beast began to come into power and control. But what we do know for certain is that today, at this day and time, you have a group of people that's in power, and they frame the society in a specific way, and they just was bent on color. So you have this color thing, that this social construct that was developed by these people, and it took some years for them to actually begin to implement this. So I'm going by what I know in terms of history and data. All right, so we're going to be dealing with the scientific aspect of their racist agenda, because certain things that they construct is dealing with things from a social standpoint, but we know that ultimately it's certain things that's ingrained into the minds of the masses, and including the world, in terms of how they view Africans in general. And so that is reflective of how they deal with the African from a geopolitical level, and certain things that they take advantage of due to the landmass that they live in, and certain things that they aren't privy to having at this day and time from an industrial standpoint. So there's a foundation to that. We call that scientific racism. I call it the white man science. Now, some people say, well, the white man science is no, science is science. There's no color on science. And I say to them, you're a goddamn lie. Now, you can use a science for a specific agenda. You could design science if you know the biology. If I know the biological makeup of black people, and I know the biological makeup of white people, I could design something scientifically that can specifically hurt black people more so than people with the genetic makeup that makes them what we consider to be a white person. So that would be the white man science. So understanding these things, we're going to get into the information. I think I did this presentation before on Argument League, but I also would like to rehash this type of information because I think that ultimately when we were talking about the white supremacy in the system, that a lot of people just don't understand what white supremacy is and how it works. I think Neely Fuller actually was the one that actually was able to kind of point us in the right direction in terms of the seven areas of activity, and Francis Cress Welsing was able to articulate it in a way in the book of ISIS Papers, which he kind of did a psychological assessment on the European and how they view things, And I don't think it's going to get any better than that, because it seems like, knowledge is on the decline at this day and time because of the information overload. So we tend to talk about a lot of things that I don't think is really necessary to dwell too much on. We make a big deal out of those things, and I think a lot of people aren't grounded in our scholars, like the Amos Wilsons, the Leonard Jeffries, Francis Cress Welsons, Asa Hilliards, and Ivan Van Sertimus, and some people think that stuff that they said was pseudo, and we have a whole, and this is going back even before then with the the library in New York City. I forget the name of the library, and this information that began to develop. I began in the early 1900s. So we're going to be dealing with that. We're going to see how it evolved over time, and we're going to see how it was constructed. So let me go ahead and share screen, and we can get started with the presentation. Okay. Okay. Are you sharing Swab Easy? Let me see. I don't know. Swab voice stepped off. Hold on a second. Hey, Swab.
Hey, yo, I was on YouTube. I could see you.
Were you able to see the screen?
Yeah, I seen with the transhumanism, from Darwinism to transhumanism.
Okay. So he's going to share the screen now. Okay, I'll do it. All right. I'll do it once again. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and get it started. From Darwin to transhumanism, because when you read the works of Darwin and the people that would affiliate with Darwin, you can see that the overall agenda would be some form of transhumanism, and we can see at this day and time that they are actually getting our bodies ready for this transhumanism evolution or revolution. You go back to the a lot of things that was deemed conspiracy theory in the 90s, like chemtrails and things of that nature, and now they are, admitting that, chemtrails do exist, but how the beast does it. He likes to manipulate, what was the obvious. So he don't call it chemtrails. He call it geoengineering. And the geoengineering was them putting out different metals into the atmosphere. And they suggest that these metals was designed because of the global warming, and that the metals was designed to repel the rays of the sun. But see, those metals are coming down from the sky, and we're breathing in those metals. So I think that that's part of this transhumanist agenda. And we see, the other aspects in that we're not going to mention due to the fact that the YouTube Nazis will definitely strike us for that. So we're not going to deal with certain information, but definitely we can see that this overall agenda is has been being orchestrated for the last maybe close to 50 years now. So okay, I talked about this individual before, but this is always a good way of starting, the conversation in terms of the overall agenda of, these people that, are deemed to be or classified as white European. This individual, Thomas Robert Malthus, he was a British scholar, and he came up with a theory after writing 6 editions of an essay on the principles of population. According to his theory, he suggests that if the world was left unchecked, the human population will override the Earth's food capacity. This is what they call a Malthusian catastrophe. So, according to him, the Earth regulates itself through famine, disease, and war. So, this was like a theory that set the foundation for a lot of the scientific racism that began to occur in the 1800s. So, this was written by Malthus in 1798 was the year, he began to construct these ideas. Now,
Racism? Something like that apply to everybody.
okay, so Charles Darwin was heavily influenced by the works of Robert Malthus. He is quoted stating in 1838, he says that is 15 months after I had begun my systematic inquiry, I happened to read for amusing Malthus on population and being well prepared to appreciate the struggle for existence, which everywhere goes on from long continued observation of the habits of animals and plants. It at once struck me that under these circumstances, favorable variations would tend to be preserved and unfavorable ones to be destroyed. The result of this would be the formation of new species. Here, then, I had at last got a theory by which to work. This is according to Darwin. So he took the works of Robert Malthus and an aspect of the theory, which suggests that this is an ongoing struggle for existence between all species. That obviously the one that is more superior will prevail, and the one that's inferior would eventually die off. And this would push on the process of evolution. So what does that say in terms of humans? That the lesser humans is going to die off, and that the more evolved humans is going to continue life for humanity on the planet. All right, so this is what he's suggesting, and that he eventually came up with the theory of natural selection, and it was this book that he would expound certain philosophical views of that theory. The origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of the favored races in the struggle for life. So they're creating this scenario where it's this ongoing struggle to live. And in terms of, once again, human beings, because what a lot of people don't realize when they read the book is that it's creating a scenario when it's using examples from other species. But the overall objective would be, once again, as what he said, looking at the works of Malthus. Malthus is not talking about cabbage and giraffes and bats. Malthus is talking about human beings. So the origin of species was saying that, well, Malthus definitely is right, because you could see that in every species on the planet. You can see that whether it's, the cabbage, because these are the examples that's used in this book. They use the example of the giraffes, the one with the longer neck is the one that survive, and that would definitely produce giraffes with longer necks. So they're kind of evolving in that way. He used the example of the bats, he never really expounded on the humans, but the very foundation of the book was predicated around kind of proving what was initiated by Robert Malthus. That's what he stated in the previous slide. And he made some statements, Charles Darwin, in terms of humans. And remember that the book of The Origin of Species, that book was not completed, according to himself. He's quoting and saying that he did not complete that book. He wrote other books as well. And this is one of them, The Descent of Man. And in those books, along with some of his private writings, you can see some of his views concerning what he considered to be the natural selection process of human beings. And this is one of the statements that he made in his book, Descent of Man. He said, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. All right, so you have a situation now where this individual, Charles Darwin, is now saying that the civilized races is going to kill off or exterminate the savage races. Who are the civilized races and who are the savage races? This is a more extensive quote from Darwin, and that's what we just read. He said, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace throughout the world the savage races. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes, as Professor Skaffelhausen has remarked, will no doubt be exterminated. The break will then be rendered wider, for it will be intervened between man and a more civilized state, as we may hope, than the Caucasian and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of at present between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. What is it? What exactly is he saying? He's saying that once that intermediate race, the intermediate race will be the Negro and the Australian. Once they are exterminated, then the gap will be wider between the white man and the gorilla. So what he's suggesting is that one, that the black man and the Australian is closer to the anthropomorphous apes or the primates than the white man. So once they're exterminated, then the gap will be rendered wider between the white man and the gorilla. This was the views of Charles Darwin. We still hold a lot of his views scientifically. So is this the white man science? Or is this just science? Explain this to me. Is this the white man science, or is this just pure science? All right. Was Charles Darwin a racist? These are some of the statements. It's a whole website that has a lot of his private letters that he wrote. So you could get exactly, the views and perspectives of Darwin. And, obviously when he's writing these letters, it's some scientific terms being put into a lot of what he's writing. Now he write many times casually, but, we're taking out, like in this very statement that you see before you, that this is predicated around his research and how he's viewing the research to fit his theory of natural selection in terms of how it is applied to humans. He says, it is very true what you say about the higher races of men. When high enough, replacing and clearing off the lower races. In 500 years, how the Anglo-Saxon race will have spread and exterminated whole nations. In consequence, how much the human race, viewed as a unit, will have risen in rank. What does that mean? What exactly is he saying? Understand that this is a theory which developed into a movement. The Anglo-Saxon race will have spread and exterminated whole nations. As a result, or in consequence, how much the human race, viewed as a unit, will have risen in rank. Remember the previous statement. He's talking about once these people are exterminated, the gap will be rendered wider. The African and the Australian, once they're killed off, then the unit as humans on this planet will have risen in rank. What does that mean? That means that the African and the Australian is holding the human race back because they're not evolved enough. That's what is being suggested with the statement. So I guess it's something that he's putting out there, in light of colonization. It's saying that, eventually the Anglo-Saxon race is going to spread and exterminate whole nations. Is it a justification for colonization? So as a result, once these lower races are out of here, then humanity can evolve. This is what's being suggested. And you can see it in modern books. And this is why, like I said, people don't understand white supremacy. They don't understand it. So when you see certain things like in the news, like, how, it's always they highlight, black criminality in the news. They like to put out the fact that black people on average don't score as high in terms of, exams and SATs and that nature. All that is kind of predicated around this white man science. Is this what he's suggesting? all that is suggesting that he is not really fit for where we're going as a race of humans on this planet. That these black folks are always behind. Even criminal behavior is an aspect of not being able to fit within the societal standards. So they will break the law as a result. Breaking the law is almost like a cop-out or an easy way out. So we now have to build these prisons to put them in. They're holding the human race back. And this is what is being suggested when you cut on the news. Now, we could cut on the news, and if they want it, it could be all white folks because they are doing the same thing. But see, they try to frame a scenario or frame a narrative to suggest that, see, this still is proving our point that once these people are exterminated, how the human race would have risen in rank. Look, they're robbing the convenience stores. They're out there shooting each other. So this is a systematic thing that's being done, all predicated around this scientific theory. And people don't look at it that deep because you're just looking at, oh, look at them dumb niggas. Yeah, they out there shooting each other again. When is black people going to stop shooting each other? That's surface level shit right there. And that's what Swab Boss was talking about. But on a much deeper level, they're conditioning you psychologically to fall in line with this scientific theory of racism. Because like I said, they could show all white folks if they wanted. There's enough crimes going out there in America. White people run up in the liquor store. I see it all day when I go up to Frankfurt. It's like zombie nation out there. That's not being highlighted. They want to criminalize the black man to show the world, look, he is not fit to exist amongst the race of humans, as what was suggested by Charles Darwin. So even the stuff, and this is on a much deeper level, even the stuff that we talk about in terms of integration is once again an example. And they designed it a certain type of way. For example, I talked about this before with I forget the lady name. The East Indian woman that used to have the TV show on Fox. I forget her name, but her brother actually wrote a book because they're brown-skinned East Indians. And what he did was he shaved his head and he applied for, I think, Harvard or Stanford. He applied as an African-American man because if he would have applied as an Asian, the standards would have been higher, just to prove a point. So he wrote a whole book showing that, well, if I would have applied to the college as an Asian, I wouldn't have been able to get in with this particular score. So he's saying that he shaved his head and pretended to be an African American, and the standards was lower. So it's this to prove a point. So now it's this back and forth between Democratic and Republican. We can show you how deep racism is that they're arguing, in terms of this integration and why this is the case and why people are fighting for this type of privilege for African Americans, and the bar has been lowered in terms of qualification amongst African Americans. So you have your pro-blacks, fighting like, yeah, that's because the system has designed the tests in a way that is not conducive to a certain from your centric standpoint, and we can't relate to certain questioning, and it's a whole conversation about that. All the while, the bigger picture is, either way you look at it, it's solidifying what he is suggesting in his theory, that like we even gotta lower the standards to get these motherfuckers in college to be doctors and higher level of expertise and professions. We still have to lower the standard. Now, the argument is valid in terms of education, because it's a system of white supremacy. So the poison starts from the quality of the schooling, as what the pro-black will say. The quality of schooling and the environment, by taking the funds and giving funds funding a certain area where white people get better quality schools, better quality healthcare, et cetera, better housing, which would result in better communities, which would result in children going to school just to learn. And on the flip side, you'll put a scenario where you're throwing drugs and which will raise the crime in a particular community, because we know now that it's admitted that they threw drugs in the black community. The system of white supremacy. So we don't connect these things. So now you're having a kid going to school and his mom's on crack. He can't totally focus on his information. On top of that, they're giving outdated books, and then they put racist teachers in there. They don't understand the mind of Africans and how we process this information and things of that nature. All this is done systematically. So what they do is they compartmentalize these things as if it's not connected. But when they produce this person graduating out of high school, of course he's going to be below the standards of a white person or an Asian in terms of understanding and processing information. So it's the system of white supremacy, but it's all designed to manufacture an individual that's going to fit what is suggested in the white man's science. That's on a much deeper level. So why you sitting up there saying, no, we deserve those things because of all those things that we were just talking about? It doesn't matter anyway, because on the overall global aspect of things, they are saying that, well, this is because you are not evolved enough to fit within this society. So it's on a much deeper level. Racism is levels to this shit. So certain people just stay on the level of, well, if we had the proper books and we had the proper science. No, they have an overall agenda where they are manufacturing. So they'll give you the crutch now. They're giving you the crutch now. Okay, we'll design a system where though we can lower the SAT scores just for you. All the while he's like, he's not, and the other cracker beside him, like, see? Once the other races are eliminated, then we can raise higher in rank as an overall race of humans. You're holding us back. We got to lower the standards just for you to become a doctor. So this has to be maintained. We have to maintain this system. More statements from Charles Darwin. It says, lastly, I could show fight on natural selection. So in his writings, he's actually posing his arguments in terms of how natural selection is as applied to humans. And it could have been in the book. And this is another interesting thing that we need to entertain. Because they begin to hide racism. That could have been in the book, that aspect of what he was talking about in natural selection that's applied to humans. And they could have taken it out. But going as what we do know for certain is that, when it came to humans, he did not really deal with that in terms of natural selection as applied to humans. But you could clearly see that he's making a statement along those lines. Lastly, I could show fight on natural selection, having done and doing more for the progress of civilization than you seem inclined to admit. Remember what risk the nations of Europe ran not so many centuries ago of being overwhelmed by the Turks, and how ridiculous such an idea is now. The more civilized so-called Caucasian races have beaten the Turkish hollow in the struggle for existence. Looking to the world at no very distant date, what an endless number of the lower races will have been eliminated by the higher civilized races throughout the world. So once again, it's this idea that he's using in terms of race, and that this race against this race and this race is going to prevail. He's not talking about like coexisting. It's like this, when you look at the struggle for life, he's suggesting that it has to be the Caucasian race against the Turks, the Caucasian race against the African, the Caucasian race against the Australian, the Caucasian race against the Asian, in this struggle for existence, when we know for certain that we could just mesh together. So this is the white man's science. This is how he viewed the world. Why would that be a struggle for existence? It could be a science that would say, well, if we all come together and love each other, we will create a superior race of people because everybody has something to offer. That's not what he's looking. That's not the angle that he's looking at it from. And this is the difference between science and the white man's science. He's saying that it's like this fight for existence, and whatever race is the better race is going to be the one that actually prevails. And there's other factors into this. Because we know for certain that races mix and civilizations crumble due to natural disasters and all different types of things. But that's not his worldview. That's not how he's looking at it. Why? Because we talking about this is going into the area where the European has colonized most of the planet. So he's speaking along those lines where he's talking about the civilized races and the extermination of the lower races, because they just killed off the people in Tasmania. They killed off the Native Americans, Perez, and they killed off the people over there in Hispaniola. They did all this. Bartholomew Dias Cassis in this book, The Destruction of the Indies, shows the atrocities that was committed on the natives of this area we call the Hells of North America. So this is how he's looking at it. This is how his worldview was shaped. That's the white man's science. Thomas H. Huxley. Thomas H. Huxley was a self-educated biologist who focused on anatomy and invertebrate zoology. He is widely accredited for his book, Evidence as to Man's Place in Nature. In this book, Thomas H. Huxley expounds on the theory posed by Charles Darwin that man's origins evolved from the great ape. So when people say, yeah, Darwin believed we came from monkeys and apes, he said, no, he didn't. Uncle Cat would say, well, no, he didn't. It's a difference between what Darwin was saying and how they reshaped it, probably going into the 1930s, how they revamped it, to get rid of certain things that he was actually suggesting. So you can read the books of Thomas H. Huxley and see that they actually believe that we evolved from this great ape, what they termed as a great ape. And this great ape is a part of the family of apes. And just say, well, it's not like a monkey, but it's all in the same family. It was being suggested. So it's not really that far of a stretch. He earned the nickname of Darwin's Bulldog because he was able to debate Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection. Many say better than Darwin himself. And once again, that will lead us to suspect that Darwin was probably a front man that was used by the Royal Society to push this theory of evolution. He was president of the Royal Society and founder of the X Club. And y'all should read about the X Club because it's, dealing with, this is some of the members of the X Club. They will be the ones that actually begin the magazine, The Nature, that magazine that all the people over there with Uncle Ken and all of them, they like to quote from Nature because that's the most prolific and long-standing magazine or information dealing with scientific analysis, around the world. And it's coming from Britain and originated in Britain, and it comes from the X Club. So that was a magazine designed to promote Darwinian theory of evolution. He doesn't know that though. He thinks it's just pure science. No, they had an agenda behind the science. The X Club was shaped by these individuals, including Thomas Huxley, and these are the people that he used to actually push the Darwinian theory of evolution and get it into colleges and university. This is a movement. A lot of people don't understand that before then they were going by the understanding of the biblical creation story, so they're coming with an alternative view. And these individuals were they played a critical role at spreading this in Europe and eventually the world And it all had a purpose behind it. And we're definitely going to get into that. Amongst other things, he also coined the term agnostic. We have certain people within the debate league say that they are agnostic. And agnosticism is the view that the existence of God, of the divine or the supernatural, is unknown or unknowable. So this is also coming from Thomas Huxley. Why is that important in terms of his theory of natural selection and how he was defending Charles Darwin? Because that's what I just said a few seconds ago, that the combating view that was going against the theory of evolution would be the creation story. So one of the things that they had to do was challenge even the existence of God in that terms, because obviously the people who follow the Bible, whether they're Christian or whatever, they believe that this is a holy scripture, that it comes from a higher power. And so they begin to challenge that. Well, I'm going to challenge the author of the book and suggest that how can you prove the existence of God? We can't prove it using our physical scientific method. We can't prove the existence of God, and that will fall in line with what we can prove is this theory. We have more evidence proving this theory of natural selection as being the source of creation than you have with your creation story. So this is why I believe that he had to delve into coining the term agnostic. So this will be Thomas H. Huxley. The Darwin, Wedgwood, Huxley, and Galton family connection. Now you have a family connection because once again they were basing this thing off of heredity, and they was under the assumption that superior genes thrive and inferior genes fail, and so they assumed that since they felt as though that the Caucasian genes were more superior, that they should mate amongst themselves to produce this quote unquote superior race of humans. So they would begin to actually try to do this. And a lot of times it will be a failure because a lot of these people were related, So this is their attempt at, and this shows that Darwin was involved in this. And you could see that ultimately he actually brought into this idea, but the foundation of the idea is predicated around his theory of natural selection. Make no bones about it. The cousin of Charles Darwin, Francis Galton, he is the one who coined the term eugenics. He's on record stating that, or before we get to that, because I believe that would be the next slide, it says Galton's premise was that the laws of inheritance apply not only to plants and animals, but humans as well. And since these traits came directly from the offsprings of parents, human characteristics, mental, physical, can be improved through selective breeding. So when you look at the term and a lot of stuff that's being thrown out there, especially with this gender war thing going around, and he says selective breeding. These terms are coming from these individuals that was predicated around the promotion of the European race at the expense of other races. That's what was suggested by Charles Darwin. So do know that. So eugenics has two aspects of it: positive and negative eugenics. Like I said, we'll get into that in a second. He is on record stating that in his memoirs, Galton recorded that the origin, and he's making reference to the origin of species that was written by his cousin Charles Darwin, had extinguished his Christian beliefs like a nightmare exposed to the light of day, and had aroused in him a spirit of rebellion against all ancient authorities whose positive and unauthenticated statements were contradicted by modern science. So science against religion. Okay, this is where this all began. in the universities in England, London, Britain. Darwin inspired Galton to pursue his long-standing interest in the topics of heredity and the improvements of the human race. Good book to read, the Oxford Handbook of the History of Eugenics. Lacking at that time scientific evidence to solidify his claim, Galton used examples of families. Darwin's family was one of the families that he used. He considered to be of the greater stock to suggest that their children inherited those superior characteristics. Once again, this is why they began to do some inbreeding, which actually failed. They had a lot of stillbirths as a result of that. So the Huxley family connection. We already know that Thomas H. Huxley was Darwin's bulldog. He was also president of the Royal Society, which also pushed the agenda of this theory of natural selection and a human evolution. They begin to challenge the Christian beliefs. And also he was a founder of the X Club, the secret group of men that actually were put into certain areas to promote and push the Darwinian views on natural selection. Okay, so these are his grandchildren, I believe. Yeah, these are his grandchildren that you see before him. Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley are their names. Julian Huxley, grandson of Thomas Huxley. These are some of the bullet points that I wanted to highlight just so you can have an understanding of, how agendas transcend generations. A lot of people don't understand that. And that's why I always say you don't really understand the system of white supremacy. That he's holding the torch that was initiated by his grandfather to continue the legacy of what the overall agenda was. Was an evolutionary biologist and author over 50 books on evolution and eugenics. Julian was the first director of UNESCO, United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization. Julian was vice president and president of the British Eugenics Society. So these are the things that actually was the overall agenda that was initiated by Darwin and Thomas H. Huxley. And you're going into the area of eugenics because remember, Darwin's cousin was Francis Galton. Julian Huxley also coined the phrase transhumanism as a way to disguise eugenics. So we tell you hearing this term now, transhumanism, and how it's being now they're going into the final stages where they are actually now showing, robots that actually are mimicking, human intelligence. And as they begin to get more advanced in technology, they are even designing these, these sex dolls that, can actually do certain things, like humans can do and things of that nature. So this has been the overall agenda. Transcending generations. This is how they seeing things. And it's merging with, at the same time, they're merging the human body with technology. And even us communicating now is an aspect of that. So even you see those people that got their leg blown off in the war, they give them like a robotic type of leg, and they're doing the same thing with the arms. Or if you watch football, the Dallas Cowboys quarterback, he broke his ankle, I believe, the season before. Dak Prescott is his name, and they replaced his ankle with a metal ankle. They replaced it. So this is the merging. And you could do the heart pacers and all different types of technology. That's what transhumanism is the merging of technology with biology, and you can see that being done today. And this was an agenda that began beforehand. We're talking about the 1800s that this agenda began to be orchestrated. So Julian Huxley is the one that coined the term transhumanism, and he said this was a way to disguise eugenics. some of the awards that he actually won. And as you can see at the bottom, he won an award for in the category of Planned Parenthood and world population. So all this is connected. Understand that white supremacy is a system. So when you're talking about, this merging with technology and the biology, when you're talking about population control, when you're talking about family planning and Planned Parenthood, you're talking about the same agenda. The same agenda. These are the different tentacles of the overall objective, which would be, to lower the population and all the things that you probably already are aware of. They say that, the conspiracy videos, you look at the Georgia Guidestones, they like to kind of make it a little Hollywood and a little dramatic. They got the music playing in the background and all that fly stuff, to kind of spook you into, being more interested into the whole thing. But a lot of the stuff that they're saying is true. So when you look at the Georgia Guidestones, they want to reduce the world population by almost 90% is what they're suggesting. Now, they tried to frame it in a way that would suggest that it's going to be this catastrophic event where they're just going to kill people. And, no, what they're doing is that was an objective. That's an objective. Meaning that if we continue this, if we could continue to promote people having 1 to 2 children, if we could continue wars, if we could now begin to put incentives on the food, which will lower the birth rates of the males and make the women infertile at the same time, if we continue to put the metals into the mouths, whether it's through dentistry or through the foods and the candies and the processed food that we eat, that eventually we could get it to a population that is reduced by almost 90%. So this is a goal that they're trying to execute, as opposed to this one event that's just going to kill off everybody. So when you're looking for this event to happen, it's never going to happen. They just slowly lower the population, and we could look at it in our lifetime. Remember, grandma used to have 15 kids, and that was the norm. A lot of our grandparents had 15 kids, 8 kids. My grandmom had 9 kids. And I heard some people say, well, yeah, grandma, grandpa, they had about 10, 12 kids. They are now framing or manufacturing the society, the social standards, how we communicate and things of that nature to lower the population. That would be the overall objective, lowering the population. I know in the 90s, it was a big thing when a girl had 5 kids. That was like, Bill, we got 5 kids, So that was a reduction. And now we're talking about today where it's those like, is 1 or 2 kids. And, we know that over there in China, they had a 1-child policy, and that they actually won an award from the United Nations. So definitely heavy stuff when you're dealing with that. Now, his brother, Aldous Huxley, which is also the grandson, obviously, of Thomas Huxley, Charles Darwin's bulldog, he was a novelist by profession, writing books that, for the most part, dealt with eugenics, population control, and world government. So now we're tying all this in, and this is why you also see within cinema, because before cinema, it would be in the books, at a point in time before they had, made cinema sophisticated and realistic enough for people to be entertained by it. People still would delve into books. And this is what he actually was doing. He wrote a book called The Brave New World, in which it says, in the world state, humans are born inside of bottles or test tubes. As the human artificially developed, they were brainwashed into believing in the value of the state through a process called hypnopedia or Wikipedia. You got the hypnopedia or sleep teaching. Humans are then divided into distinct class groups: alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons. Ironically, alphas, or the elite class, fit eugenic standards in terms of height, stature, skin, hair, and eye color. The epsilons being the contradiction to alphas were systematic engineered to be less intelligent than the alphas and were created artificially inside of test tubes. In other words, they were genetically engineered clones that had no individuality, whose sole purpose was to be slaves to the world state. Now, this can be, I guess science fiction, as what you say, right? But remember, right? His grandfather was part of the X Club. His grandfather and his brother is pushing eugenics, because that's just a form of eugenics. But this is done from a scientific standpoint inside of the test tubes. This is what you're seeing today. Human in vitro fertilization, where they can actually map out the sperm to take away certain ailments or diseases that can be genetically passed on from the father. Certain things, they even go specific to ear and eye color, as what it says in this allegedly this science fiction. But now we're actually doing these things, whereas though they could actually manufacture inside of the test tubes individuals that are more smarter than others. So the epsilon, when you look at it, the epsilon pretty much have no chance in dealing with the alphas, because everybody is growing inside of these test tubes. And how they designed the alphas, they designed them genetically to be superior than the epsilons. So from the time that they are sperm merging with the egg, they're doing something with that process to make the epsilons inferior to the alphas. It's being suggested in the movie. Where are we going? And we can't get into certain things. We don't want to deal with certain things because it gets into a whole nother situation. But very interesting stuff. Whereas though you see society is now going into the direction of this will be the healthier process in bringing life onto the planet. That this evaluation through the scientists, the genetic splicing and the investigation of the sperm and the merging with the egg and the creating the artificial womb. I just looked at the new Matrix the other day. It wasn't as good as the first one, because we know Sophia Stewart actually wrote the Matrix. They need to go back to her and get some more ideas. But the concept still existed of them being in this artificial womb. That would be the Matrix. And they don't know it because they're plugged in electronically into the artificial womb. That's a form of transhumanism. And we're actually doing an aspect of this, a very infant form of what you're seeing in the Matrix is going on today with the internet. We're locked in and we're communicating from all across the globe. We're communicating with a lot of people. So they're taking it a step further by giving you these big old goggles that you put on, and it makes you feel like you're inside of the room. It's a Christian, and because a lot of people don't like to look at the Christian type of movie, but you got to look at all the information so you can be able to process it and take out the nuggets that's in the movie. It's a good Christian movie called Left Behind, whereas so they actually show that it's through virtual reality that the Antichrist will manifest itself. Very interesting concept. And you can see that these things are being kind of orchestrated today, where they're gearing society towards, less communication, less interaction, and more communication using the technology. Once again, the merging of humans with technology. He was an advocate of psychedelic drugs, and this is going to take us to a whole nother arena. And kind of going back to the Matrix, you can see that was an aspect of the Matrix, which will reflect in the red pill and the blue pill. And you can see in this new Matrix that actually, when he actually takes the pill, he actually gets a little high, when he actually takes the pill. But that's kind of what is being suggested in the original one with the red pill and blue pill, that the psychedelic drugs is responsible of taking you into another world, so to speak, or that's one of the ways of getting out of the Matrix. Now we could see that, because psychedelic drugs, obviously existed before the advent of the European. We could see in other civilizations that they would use psychedelic drugs in a more ritualistic type of ceremonial way. But that still was a science. Make no bones about it. That's why they would have, what the white man would call witch doctors. But those would be the scientists of that time, whereas though they could actually tap into what we call today the spiritual realm to get certain connection to the cosmos and to the natural order of things. And this is how they were able to, make advancements scientifically. They just had a different method, and they would actually do ceremonial things to actually cure diseases and things of that nature. But it was in a lot of ways they were using what we would today call psychedelic drugs to actually get their mind to transcend the physical realm or the matrix, So that would be the black man science. And they actually would demonize it. They call it black magic, the black man's magic. So you call that witchcraft. And you have names to vilify the black magic, but that will be the black scientists. And that's why when they do the certain rituals, it was relegated to a certain priest that they would actually know the science. And the what the priest would do, he would make it a cultural thing. Whereas though that when you get bit by a snake, you grab the egg and you do this, and then they would do it like a ritual, and the ritual would be the ceremonial dancing and things of that nature, just for the common man to be able to remember the process over generations, so that even was a science then. Whereas though now you have it's and that's the difference between the white man science and the black man science. See, the way he designed it was so that the person could remember the process. Okay, you get bit by the snake. What we do is we'll create a bonfire, and we'll take an eggshell and we'll mix it with this, and we'll sit it on the bonfire, and then we'll dance around the bonfire. Now the dancing may have little significance as to what the cure is, but it was designed from a position of remembering what you have to do, and that would be something that they know will be part of the process. So this can be passed on to generations. Whereas though the child can see that, okay, we dance around the bonfire, and we use the fire to let them sweat it out, and then we take the egg, and then we make them eventually eat what will eventually heal the person, from a scientific standpoint. But they don't know why they're doing it as the generations went on. So what the white man does in terms of he creates the artificial version of that. That's why he has to go into the rainforest. And when you talk about the pharmaceutical company, you see that is pretty much they take the herbs from the rainforests and then the natural herbs, and he manufacture it into a pharmaceutical drug, because you can't take a natural herb and sell it as if it's your own. So they make an artificial version of that, and using certain aspects of natural healing elements that he's taken from indigenous nations, and he will manufacture it into an artificial form of drug that he began to disseminate to the masses. So his thing is predicated around capitalism, whereas though the civilization before was more of a communal thing. The white man science and the black man science. It's a difference. Now, it's a scientific aspect to it, which would be the actual herb curing certain elements, but the way they manufacture it and the way they construct it, is predicated around their ontology. So people don't understand these things. So Aldous Huxley was an advocate of the psychedelic drugs, supporter of the Esalen Institute, experimented on the effects of psychedelic drugs and mind control. Because he's going around the McCarthy post World War II baby boomer era. You're talking about Aldous Huxley, Aldous' grandfather Thomas H. Huxley. He believed that humans were evolving through the use of psychedelic drugs. Interesting. That's coming from, remember, Thomas H. Huxley, which was Darwin's bulldog. So he believed that we were evolving through the use of psychedelic drugs. It would be this man by the name of Terence McKenna who would take what was espoused by Thomas H. Huxley, and he would come up with what they would call the Stone Ape Theory. The Stone Ape Theory, according to Terence McKenna, is a theory suggesting that the Homo erectus evolved into the Homo sapien through the use of mushrooms. They came in contact to some mushrooms, and when you take the psychedelic drugs, you begin to think outside of the box, and you begin to and what he's suggesting is that this is how the Homo erectus began to evolve into the Homo sapien. Now, today they call this a pseudoscience, but this was permanent at the time and coming through Terence McKenna, and this goes back into, once again, Thomas H. Huxley, what he initially posed. And he wrote books, Man's Place in Nature, where he's kind of merging the different forms of apes and suggesting a lot of different theories. But remember, it was Thomas H. Huxley that actually had the belief that humans evolved through the use of psychedelic drugs. And this is going to be something that you should keep in mind as we move forward. Terence McKenna is on record stating that he was highly influenced by a man by the name of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Who is this individual? This is the individual. He was a paleontologist and a geologist who was author of the book called The Future of Man and the Phenomenon Man, where he speaks of the evolution of consciousness. Some points made in this book were used by Terence McKenna's Stone Ape Theory. So you see in this connection now. Terence McKenna. Terence McKenna and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he was a proponent of eugenics and population control, using the pseudoscience as what we were suggesting before. One of these ideas of psychedelic drugs, things that is considered pseudo now, but they still are using these things for their own, purposes even to this day. The connection between these three individuals. We know that when you talk about Julian and Aldous Huxley, obviously they were standing on the shoulders of their grandfather, Thomas H. Huxley, which is connected to Charles Darwin's bullshit theory of evolution. Right? So keep that in mind. Julian Huxley and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin were in constant communication with each other, exchanging thoughts and ideas on Darwinian evolution. Julian Huxley would write the introduction to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's book, The Phenomenon of Man. So they pretty much was fucking with each other pretty much. It was cool. They expounded and they exchanged ideas. They were in constant communication, so much so that, you know what, let me write the introduction to that book that you're about to put out there. Now, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, along with Aldous Huxley, were also a member of the French eugenicist Alexis Carrel's foundation. So Aldous Huxley, the brother of Julian Huxley, and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was a part of the same eugenic movement, or the foundation. So they were supporters of eugenics, population control. Obviously, you read the books. You're now aware of the books written by Aldous Huxley, where he created a science fiction of a Brave New World. And then that term is still used. They actually made a movie out of the book, and that you probably could check out. And they all had this kind of eugenic type of vibe to it. So they all are communicating with each other. Why is this important? Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was the paleontologist behind the Piltdown Man hoax. The Piltdown Man hoax was a paleoanthropological hoax in which bone fragments were presented as fossil remains of previously unknown early human. A paleontologist is a scientist that studies fossils. Okay, so The Piltdown Man hoax was an anthropological hoax. So these paleontologists that studied the fossils, they would have to be the ones responsible for the hoax, because what was suggested was that they took the bone of a human skull and they attached it to the jawbone of an orangutan. So it would be the paleontologists that actually would study the fossils. So if anybody knew about the hoax, it would be Pierre Tildor de Chardin. So once again, looking at this connection, remember, going back to the Darwinian theory of evolution, remember, he's making this connection with humans from the European, I guess you could say the Asian would be next, or the Mongoloid, and then you have the Negro, and then the Australian, and then the actual apes like orangutans and gorillas and things of that nature, right? So once again, when you're talking about this theory of evolution, you see that this theory was manufactured without any evidence proving this theory of evolution, that we was connected somehow to these apes in some type of way, right? So you have the theory before you have the evidence. These are the descendants of the people that actually came up with the theory. Think about this. The person that they're communicating with is responsible for manufacturing the evidence which will connect this idea. These were publications that was published inside of the magazine Nature. For 40 years, they actually went with this hoax, right? Creating this atmosphere, and we talk about the white man's science. The white man's science is what we call it. So now they're manufacturing archaeological and paleontological, if that's the word, evidence suggesting that these fossils will be the merging between the humans and the ape. Why would they have to falsify the fossils? Why would they have to falsify it? Because there's no evidence suggesting that the theories that they were coming up with were accurate. So the paleontologists would have to falsify fossils in order to, show any evidence, any fossil evidence suggesting that what they've been saying for the last 100 years is accurate. A little bit more on him, Pierre Tildor de Chardin. The college that he went to. Once again, he said the finds was also considered legitimate by Otto Skostensack, who had discovered that Heldenberg fossils just a few years earlier. He described it as being the best evidence for an ape-like ancestor to modern humans. They were working overtime. He was also a Jesuit priest. So this would be evolution for dummies. Darwin is connected to the Huxleys. Remember, because Huxley was the one that was actually more able to debate the Darwinian theory of natural selection in college and academic circles. Robert Malthus, you see on your left, is the cousin of Charles Darwin. He will come up with the term eugenics. Thomas Huxley, Charles Darwin's bulldog, his two grandsons, Julian Huxley and Aldous Huxley, would be associated. They would do by writing a series of books in terms of pointing us into the direction of eugenics and population control. Aldous Huxley was more dealing with it from a more secular standpoint, writing novels, speaking of this world or global state, which foundation is predicated around messing with the biological makeup or the genetics of human beings to manufacture a superior race of people and an inferior race of people. He called that book The Brave New World. They will be associated with an individual by the name of Pierre Tiltard de Chardin, which would be the paleontologist behind the Piltdown Man hoax. All right. Now, all this is coming from this man, Thomas Malthus or Robert Malthus, who suggested that the world is regulating itself through famine, disease, and war, and its ever-going struggle for existence. Understanding white supremacy, how it transcends generations, and ultimately, become more sophisticated as it goes. Once again, going back into Francis Galton, you see that in his memoirs, he dealt with. He let everybody know what was the information that got him from his Christian beliefs, and that information will be the book written by his cousin, The Origin of Species, which will be Charles Darwin. Once again, Charles Darwin, his premise was that the laws of inheritance apply not only to plants and animals, but humans as well. Galton believed that the characteristics, mental and physical, can be improved through selective breeding. Galton went on to say that the unfit of society was producing more rapidly than the more fit. Once again, that is a Malthus, ideological perspective, if left unchecked, the human race can override the food supply, is what Robert Malthus says. Galton accused civilized society for the rapid growth of the unfit, claiming that they are the ones that provide food, shelter, and vaccinations to the lower stock instead of letting nature take its course, right? So the idea was predicated around famine, disease, and war, and I can't see how war. I guess you could say naturally humans fight. I guess you could say that. Yeah. So, in his book Hereditary Genius, Galton calculated that Black Africans ranked on average 2 grades below whites in natural ability. 2 grades below whites in natural ability. I guess you could tell LeBron James that, And Australian Aborigines 3. He then goes on to say that the ancient Greeks, particularly the Athenians, were the best race of people, and that the decline of the Athenians was because they did not preserve and produce their superior genetic stock. According to Galton, the Anglo-Saxon race was in the process of making the same mistake as the ancient Greeks. So instead of promoting the merging of different humans, he created a pseudoscience that suggested that, well, we can't merge with humans because that would bring down society. That's what is being suggested here. Now, you're going back to Charles Darwin, when he was suggesting that, well, this is ongoing fighting and struggle between the different races to see who's the more superior race. Now, we get into the interesting part. It says Galton proposed that humans should deliberately take charge of their own evolution, doing for themselves what breeders did for domestic plants and animals. This was what Galton would later call positive eugenics, increasing the proportion of individuals with desirable traits. Negative eugenics would be to decrease the proportion of those with undesirable traits. So now we're just kind of moving forward. Understand that this is the ideology that is actually now being implemented now globally. When you talk about the world population and the population council and the different things that they're doing internationally. there was a theory going around, I believe, the early 19th century called the doomed or the dying race theory. Dying race theory was a pseudo-scientific theory that suggested that indigenous nations could not adjust to European colonialism and would eventually die off at the hands of the European colonizer. This is exactly what Darwin was saying in his theory. So we know that that's pseudo now. So, this is the white man's science. This theory was created by Darwin, European anthropologist, Darwinian European anthropologist, as a way of justifying European expansion. So what was the objective of Charles Darwin? Because he espoused the same views. He espoused the same views. And what we see today is, once again, that it's still an aspect of this being done very discreetly. Very discreetly. From a domestic standpoint here in America, where they constantly compare the races and the education without adding certain factors into it. So they like to now take control, as what Francis Galton said, of this process. So they want to design this individual, this inferior individual, or this inferior African, to justify, once again, their bullshit theory of evolution. Now, I have many more slides, but I think this is enough for now. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and continue this at a later date. We got about like 80 slides out this motherfucker. You go all the way in, and I'm not finished. I'm still not finished this PowerPoint presentation, because we've just gone up into maybe going up into post World War II. We get into molecular biology. We get into things of that nature. So Margaret Sanger and all that different stuff that you should already be aware of. We get into that, and then we get into Francis Crick and James Washington, which will take us into the Human Genomic Project and this new form of scientific racism, or the white man's science, which would be the ultimate goal that they were talking about from the very beginning, which would be to take the process from the woman's womb into an artificial womb, and a lot of deep things that a lot of y'all call conspiracy theories, but definitely when you do research, is a conspiracy fact. So it's almost 2:00 in the morning. So I'll open the panel for just a couple of, what you're getting out of this information. What you getting out of this information? What do you see? Yeah, I got an 80 clip for you. Brat. I want that 100 clip. Got to get the 100 clips. You know what I'm saying? You want to drop a load, because the information is very extensive when you're connecting dots. So is anybody still awake? I see a couple of people on the panel. Anything you want to say? Any comments or questions? Any comments or questions? We'll see all of them on mute. So this is for the nerds. This is for the nerds and the geeks. We go in, we go all the way in, we put our foot into this whole thing. You know what I'm saying? Since there are not any questions or any comments, we can go ahead and end the stream. I probably will be doing this presentation again tomorrow on Sister Nandy's channel, where I probably go all the way in, but it's definitely getting late, or actually early. So I'll just do the process of switching the account to the argument lead, so I can shut this thing down, and Shout out to the people in the chat. Who we got in the chat? Free Spirit. Melly Mel is in the building. Asiatic Lion. That WY is fucking me up, so I call you Ziggy. All right, so let me see. Peace to the family. I'm about to end the stream. Shout out to Out the Blue.